Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Dubs. I'm your host, Bill T. Well, it's Friday, and that means we've got another podcast teed up for you guys. And this week's podcast is a great story about adventure, world travel, and stumbling across an opportunity to make some rubber. That's right. So we get Simon Kelley on the podcast today. He's one of the foremost manufacturers in Type 3 aftermarket rubber that's been supplied throughout the world. But it's a long story. It's a good story. There's lots of ups and downs to it, an interesting adventure through Thailand and such. So I know you guys will get a kick out of it today. So great story and getting to know those people around the world that have contributed to this wonderful hobby that we have. But before we get into that, make sure you guys support our sponsors. VW Trends Magazine, not the same old stuff. Subscribe today at their website, vwtrendsmagazine.com. Also, our boys over at Roswell. If you're looking for some great parts for your car, high quality aftermarket parts made for enthusiasts, not third party through somebody else, but actually manufactured by Volkswagen enthusiasts, go check out Roswell today. They've got a special on their website for their Heritage Pulley Complete Setup Billet. Looks like the old school, but it's updated, and it's $330 for a complete package. They've also got pretty rad stuff. Solid shift mounts. They've got billet distributor clamps and all kinds of cool stuff. The banjo fittings are pretty rad as well. So go check out their website today. One of my personal favorites, the locking dipstick. Go get you one of those, man. The locking dipstick for your Volkswagen. I like everything they've got. They're pushing the limits on Volkswagens. Their new Viton seals. Go get your Viton seal on your sun plate and never have to do that stupid paper gasket again. And go get that picked up today. Guys, I appreciate you guys for listening. Always want to give a shout out to those that have supported the podcast. Shout out this week goes to Frank Rigos for supporting the podcast out of Lee Summit, Missouri. Appreciate you for supporting the podcast. Your stuff is getting shipped out to you today, along with a few extra things. Appreciate you for supporting the podcast. We always give a shout out to people that support the podcast. So if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, or if you pick up some merch, or if you send me a letter, I'll probably read it on the podcast. Like this one, Eric Kuntz sent me a message. Bill, I just watched the reveal of Zorba. So if you guys don't know about a YouTube channel, go check it out. You must be so pumped. It's gorgeous. I've always wanted a Type 3. The color's off the hook. Love all the stuff that harkens back to your heritage. Nobody's more deserving of a sweet ride like Zorba. I look forward to Fridays for the podcast. Keep up the great work. You're a pillar in the VW community. Best, Eric Kuntz. Appreciate that, Eric, man. Thanks for watching. And the YouTube channel is growing a little bit. I'm going to be putting out a DFL video probably this weekend. It is the biggest cow look club in Germany. These guys are hardcore, and we did the cow look cruise with them. So I've got a video coming out this weekend with that, as well as probably I just got to go through and do the last final touches in editing the cow look cruise video. And then there's going to be one where my buddy Vegas Micah G and I did a side-by-side comparison, old bus, new bus. And since Andy's bus is here at my house, I cruised his bus down there to do the comparison and romped on it a little bit. So appreciate that. And appreciate all you guys for listening. So make sure you share the podcast with all your friends. And don't forget to support Let's Talk Dubs any way you can. Room reservations are open. Go to letstalkdubs.com right now and book your room for one crazy weekend. I'm getting confirmations every day. People from all over the world are flying out to one crazy weekend. You don't want to miss it. Don't be the only guy that's not here. Make sure you go book your room today. They will cut off room bookings 30 days in advance. I need you guys to make sure you get your rooms booked. I know it seems like a long way out. Before you know it, October will be here, and we will be cruising the strip together, all of us. Takeover. All right, it's not going to be a takeover. But there's going to be hundreds of Volkswagens on the strip cruising together and racing. Well, not racing. Stop it, Bill. They're going to be driving around town looking for money, right? There's going to be the poker. We added this year the poker tournament. There's an actual poker tournament that's going to be taking place on Friday before the event. And there's going to be a bowling tournament as well. So there's more stuff to do the whole weekend. It's going to be a great time just hanging out with all your VW pals, and your car's all locked up in a safe spot. Well, not locked up, left out to breathe for all the people to enjoy. So it's going to be a great weekend. I'm looking forward to it. Super excited. And we're working on building bigger and better things out here. So for my people in the Northeast, the countdown has started. 114 days to go until New England's premier indoor air-cooled only event, the Luft Klassiker. Get out there. Get registered today. Go to lufthouse.com, and it's going to be happening in Trevorton, Rhode Island, May 18th, 2025. So It's going to be the latest event brought to you by the organizers of New England Dust Off, which is in its 21st year. There's going to be they're taking inspiration from the West Coast events, and they're looking to do it in an all air cooled event. Now, if you're not air cooled, there's parking out front that's in a non-judged area. That'd be for you guys. This is the largest indoor show. So if you guys, I want you guys to go look in the mirror and think to yourself, have I ever complained about the show scene? And if you have, then it's your responsibility to support the events that go on. Do your best, give it your all, show up, support the event, and see what happens. That's what I'm challenging you guys to do. Stop crying about the scene and do something about it. Support, go, and help those people that are helping the VW scene. So you guys should be excited in the Northeast up there in Rhode Island for the Luft Klassiker. So go check it out. Go to their website today and check them out. I'll put a link down in the description below so you guys in the Northeast can go get set up for the Luft Klassiker. I'm excited for these guys to be putting on a big event. We need more cool events. So when these guys are doing something like that, make sure you support it. So anyway, guys, I've been working on all kind of stuff. Probably do a roundtable coming up for those of you that love them, which is most people. And there's a few that might not like them. I got a lot of good feedback on our YouTube video of picking the top 10 80s and 90s magazines, and there's limitations to that. But we did VW Trends. Go check it out on our YouTube channel. Put a link in the description down below. If you guys want to check out the YouTube video on that, it's pretty rad. Had a good time with the boys from around the world. I'll be inviting some new guests this time, and we're going to be doing hot VWs next. So be prepared to be judged. All right, not really. We're going to pick our favorite magazine covers. So if you guys want, go to that one below. I'll leave a link to that video. And if you want, jump on that link and tell me what your favorite magazine cover is, and I'll judge you based on that. But no, it's always interesting to see what different things inspire and push those of us that are in the VW scene. I mean, our generation was, you see that magazine on the shelf and it fired you up for an entire year on building a car or doing something. Motivation, stimulation overload was not a thing back then, because it took so long for magazine publications, all stuff, versus today we're flooded every day with Instagram and images and all that stuff. And it may, you know what it is? I've come up with this analogy right now. Nobody steal this. I'm the originator of this. Instagram is the SEMA show of magazines. So when you go to the SEMA show, if you've never been, by the time you leave the SEMA show, I don't care how cool or nice your car is. You go back home and you're like, dude, I don't have a 42-inch coming up out of the dash, or I don't have a hot tub in the back. I mean, you don't have all these wild things where you see the boundaries getting pushed. And Instagram is the same way for us. It's like sensory overload. There's so much good stuff. Sometimes we don't even stop and really enjoy it. So I know I'm guilty of that. I cruise through all the time without liking stuff and all that. And it's like people put it up there to get likes. So you guys make sure you see something you like it. Go follow us, speaking of that, on Instagram. Like us on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, share this podcast with all of your friends so that they get it. Post it on your Facebook. Make a link to it. Leave a link to the Libsyn link down below so all your friends that have Androids and difficult lives because they chose the Android path, they can listen to it as well. So appreciate it. Thanks, guys, for listening, and go make fun of your Android buddies. I'm just kidding. If you're Android guys, you're getting mad right now. Don't get mad. It's just a joke. Relax. Anyway, guys, it's a great podcast this week. This is the guy who makes the rubber. So if you listen carefully, you'll understand he makes a lot of rubber for a lot of stuff. So low key, like James Bond, but totally different. This week's podcast, we're going to get into it. Man about the world traveled, started from nothing into a guy who's created a resource for all of us people doing restoration. So let's get into it this week. Simon Kelley, 1500 Notch on Facebook. Simon Kelley on this week's Let's Talk Dubs.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.
Okay, everybody. So on today's show, with my connections that continue to keep growing around the globe, When I was building the Type 34 in England, my good friend Andy had introduced me to a friend of his, Simon. And Simon is the purveyor of Notch 1500, manufactures parts for Type 3s, and he also sells Type 3s through Type 3 rubber through his eBay channel. He had a hand in supplying some parts and verifying some bits and pieces for my Type 34. And this podcast is really a story about enthusiast to manufacture and the lengthy travel in between. So on today's podcast, I want to welcome Simon Kelley to the show. Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Hey there, Bill.
It's great to have you on. We've had a few discussions here and there, but the way we always start the podcast is, what's your VW story and how did you get into Volkswagens?
Well, it started at a very early age. Well, not so much Volkswagens, but my dad was a complete petrol head, motorbikes and cars. From a very early age, he was always in the garage playing with his tools, which annoyed him immensely. And we used to go to when I was about 7 or 8, we used to go to the speedway, the motorbike speedway. And we used to go to see other grass tracking events and all sorts of things quite early on in life. And I just got a real interest in cars. And he always used to buy these magazines like Practical Classics, motorbike magazines. So that's kind of when the love of cars and bikes kind of came along.
Nice.
And then I didn't get it. So a neighbour had a 1302. When we moved house, I was about 14 and we moved house. It was a Savannah Beige 1302S. He was forever playing with it, and polishing it. And I thought, it's really cool. I'd come across a neighbour of ours when I was very young, had a late model fastback. And I was just like, these are quirky looking things. And I started work at Marconi, did an apprenticeship, engineering apprenticeship. Actually, what you do, the first year there, you make your own tools.
Really?
You make your own tools. Like you start off, the first thing you make is a scribe, but you have to make it sharp and last on mild steel. So you learn annealing and tempering and stuff, and then you might make calipers or something.
You machine all the parts and assemble it, everything?
Yeah, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Was it what now? Is this Marconi company in relation to Marconi the inventor?
Yes, and I got sent to a department that was called High Power, and it was the testing department for the units. It was a very boring job, and we had a lot of time on our hands. Every month it was someone's turn to buy one of the magazines, which would be Custom Car, Street Machine, occasionally Hot VWs or something, or VW Trends. There was very little in terms of VW's magazine. I would say every other month edition there was a Beetle with something going on. At the same time, this 1302 that my neighbour had, I hadn't seen him drive it for ages. And I just said, what's going on with your car? And he said, it's failed the MOT. I'm going to scrap it. And I was like, no way. Would you sell it to me? And I haven't even passed my test yet. And I was taking lessons. But I was like, I'd really want it. So I'd be 17. That's also then the first year I'm looking at all these magazines in the break room that we're buying, looking at all these Beetles with a V8 wedged into them, and the Kelley scene starting to filter through into Custom Car Magazine, because Keith soon worked for Custom Car Magazine. I bought this 1302 off the neighbour. Obviously found out it was quite rusty and the heating channels were pretty gone and everything, so sort of shelved the idea for a little while. Then I started buying Custom Car Magazine myself. They started to put an advert in for Bug Jam, first ever Bug Jam UK. And I thought, I could go, if I get this car done, I can go to.
That's a long way around, right? Get the car
and
first.
That's exactly what happened. I got it MOT'd, roadworthy, about 6 weeks before, and I went to the very first ever Bug Jam at Santa Pod.
And what was that experience like?
Well, it was nothing like it. I mean, if you went there today, you say, this is pretty cool if you've never been before. Santa Pod is a as a racing event, as a dragster event, was on its knees. In fact, the track itself wasn't brilliant at the time. But I think over the course of a weekend, I think about 3,000 people turned up. I think I was ticket number 88 because I'd pre-ordered the tickets through Custom Car Magazine. It's Keith Soon with some other people, obviously, maybe Brian Burrows or some other people had put it on, had promoted it, but they only promoted it through Custom Car Magazine. Then they brought out Volksworld magazine, which was started by Keith Soon. And at the time that Bug Jam 1 was on, Keith Soon was drag racing a late model fastback, and it was a real run what you brung weekend. I'd never seen so many Volkswagens anywhere. There was like little raves going on in this corner, and it was a mad weekend. Come on Sunday, at the end of the drag strip, I noticed this really odd-looking car with what looked to me felt like an older gentleman, but in fact he was only in his late 20s, with a straw hat and sort of like sailing shoes, sort of blue with the white. But it didn't fit in very well.
Yeah.
But it was the whole weekend was mad anyway, because loads of people were there with very custom-built cars and standard cars, and it wasn't your old school. It was all new stuff, all new in essence. And I was like looking at this car and I was going, wow, that's mad. That looks funky. And I walked all the way, like halfway down the drag strip to go and see him parked towards the end. And he was all on his own, sitting in a deck chair. And I went, what have you got? I'd never seen one before. And it was a Gulf Blue notchback. And it was Brian Johnson.
Really?
So if you ever bought a book in the 80s, like The Evolution of Volkswagen, where it turned to the page, says in 1962 or 61 they developed the Type 3, which is a notchback, it would generally have a picture of his car as the example. And I was looking around his 63 Gulf Blue, and I was like, wow, this is, I want one. I've got to have one. Right? And he goes, I've got one for sale. And I went, have you? And he went, yeah. And I said, well, where do you live? And he said, Wigston. And I went, are you joking? I live in Thurmaston. It's like 20 minutes away. Do you know Andy Green? And I went, no, I've never heard of him. He said, well, it's Andy Green's shop in Thurmaston. So I literally walked 4 minutes to go and look at the car that I then bought.
And this is in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Mid 80s, yeah.
87 maybe. 86.
You're living in the UK, and to look at a Type 3 is foreign because you're not associating a Type 3 with the Beetle.
No. And I obviously saw Beetles around everywhere, but I never saw, I don't personally remember. I know a neighbour of mine had a late model pig nose fastback.
Right.
And I had seen late model squarebacks. But I'd never seen I don't remember ever seeing a notchback until I saw Brian's that day. And I ended up buying this 65 1500S. Oh, it was bad. It was bad.
A little bit rusty, a typical UK car.
It was, yeah, once you started taking it apart, it was like, I don't know if I've got the fabrication skills for this.
Hold on a second. You're a guy who just made his own pliers, and you're telling me that this car was out of your wheelhouse, huh?
What they don't teach you is how to panel beat and form panel. They never taught us how to MIG or TIG in the skill center, but what they did teach us was how to oxyacetylene and like weld 1 mil thick to 1 mil thick. I remember making my own toolbox.
I think that's that is a fantastic apprenticeship to go to.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many businesses are still run like that today?
None.
And it's
none. No.
I mean, to imagine to have that skill set at such a young age and be able to, the sense of accomplishment that you can make the tools that you need to work with. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
So I bought that notch anyway. That's what we got up to, and it was very bad.
So you buy the notch and you start to work on rebuilding this thing yourself. Yeah,
well, at the time, alongside that, I'd been working at weekends fixing clutches for people for a bit of extra money. And after I bought the notch, I bought an early fastback. Well, it would have been a 67 fastback, and that was really bad. So I just broke it for parts. Because I stayed good friends with Brian, he'd be like, "Oh, I've been up to Melton and I've seen a square back in a farmyard. Do you fancy going up there and we'll ask the man if we can buy it? So we started, just stripping cars. If people say, yeah, all right, well, and we started a real big collection of parts. We started going to I went to Bug Jam for 10 years in a row, actually. So that's just how I got into VWs as such, because then my dad got into it.
Oh, really?
And my brother got into it. Yeah, oh, yeah. One year we went, I think 2 or 3 years, so Bug Jam 3 or 4, we all went in Volkswagens. My brother had a Bay, my dad had a Bay. I think I went in the Beetle, and we just really got into it. It was like every month we were off somewhere, and I was still doing the drag racing with VW DRC. It was bracket racing, so you didn't really have to win anybody. You just had to be consistent, and your car had to be consistent. The people were great, and there was no bitchiness, and it was a fun time to be 20, enjoying your Volkswagen life. Of course, they had parts for sale and cars for sale, and started taking parts, second-hand parts for sale, and we go to swap meets, and sometimes Brian would join and we'd go to Dobfries or another show, VW Action, a little bit of pocket money, really.
Sure.
To sort of pay for your hobby. What kind of became apparent after 4 years of owning that notch that I bought from Brian was that I was never going to repair that, and it just got shelved. I kind of hadn't been in the scene for a little while, but still stayed in touch with Brian and still broke cars for spares. And then I hit a bit of a rough patch, actually. My marriage came to an end, and I lost my job, and I didn't really do much for a couple of years, if you know what I mean. Didn't do anything.
Did you get out of the scene for a little bit, or were you still in the Volkswagen scene?
That was it, really. Yeah, I think I still went to a couple of Bug Jams, but I think if you're not at the time, you can lose enthusiasm for it. Anyway, I got back on my feet. Then I ended up working for a welding company, fixing plants, MIG and TIG plant.
Nice.
Got back into the VW scene, started going back to Bug Jam, and trying to think when it was, I can't remember exactly what year, but then we were sort of like in mid-90s now, let's say. I went to a Bug Jam, and there was a guy there from Sweden who had brought a load of parts, but he'd also brought pictures of cars for sale in Sweden.
And now this is before Sweden becomes like the honeypot of all these Volkswagens, because there was a lot of Volkswagens in Sweden discovered during the 80s and 90s, right?
Yeah, I kind of mine was kind of the back end of it. I'd already heard of people going to Sweden and bringing back hordes of cars. Richie King practically lived in Sweden for 6 months, I think, bringing back cars, I'm sure. They had a nickname for him, was Itchy King. Itchy Thing, that's it, Itchy Thing. And I saw an anthracite notchback, a 62, for sale. I think it was the equivalent of £2,000. And it said one owner from new. It was a fairly high mileage car, but it said mostly original paint. And what sold it for me was the interior. The salt and pepper interior was immaculate, which is unheard of. And I was like, I got the details. I rang the guy up, or I think I probably emailed him, actually, because we got email back then. Said, yeah, I want to come and have a look. And I flew to Sweden, bought it, and drove the car back.
And that was your first original mileage car? Because you did some drag racing too, right? So you did some drag racing, and then as you're pushing in the Type 3 hobby, do you start to, are you doing custom Type 3s? Or are you doing stock but lowered? I mean, what's your flavor with the Type 3s?
I've never had a big budget for anything. Oh, what I forgot to mention was the 1302 that I had for many years.
Yeah.
I stripped it down and repainted it myself, and in cellulose, because that was the paint you got back then, as well as doing all the welding that I'd previously done. So, and I bought all new seals, I put a new headliner in it, I retrimmed the seats, and I took it for an MOT. And the guy didn't want to give me the MOT certificate for it.
Why?
He wanted to buy the car. Right.
Did he try to strong arm you?
Yeah.
It's not going to pass.
He was like, he was just like, I've MOT'd it, but I want to talk to you before I give you the thing. He said, my daughter wants one of these. And I think he offered me like £1,800 for it, which was probably very good money. But I was thinking it was worth 2,500, 2,500, right? So I was like, no, mate, it's not for sale. Plus, it looked absolutely gorgeous. And, with a brand new paint on it, and it shone, and I was really proud of it. And I didn't really want to sell it. And about 3 months later, I put it on in the local newspaper in the car ads on a Thursday. And I had a couple of people saying they were going to come and look at it on Saturday. And on the Friday night, somebody drove into it.
No way.
Yeah, and rear-ended it, and was parked outside in the middle of the night. And it got repaired under insurance, but the repair work wasn't as good as the work I'd done.
Really?
And I kind of lost interest in the car.
They'll take the.
Yeah, and it wasn't my love anyway. I just wanted a notchback to drive around in.
You're trading parts as a secondhand, like a car. You guys call it a breaker over there, where you take cars, break them down, and resell the parts, and you're kind of on the side trader. So then you start working in. Like, do you have a big NOS stash of parts that you ever run into while you because you at an early point in the hobby, you kind of become the Type 3 guy?
Stanford Hall show. I used to go there with Brian, selling parts. People would bring their haul of parts, and nobody was interested in Type 3 parts. And they couldn't really value them either because nobody wanted to buy them. A few little things, if you've ever had pre-disc brake Type 3,
right,
you would know that it's got twin slave cylinders on each front corner.
Like a bus. Yeah,
like a bus, but they only fit Type 3s. And there's a 62 and 63 size shape, and there's a 64, 65 shape. And they're handed as well, like the bus ones.
Sure.
So you might pick one up in a box, NOS, for £5 or £10 if or you might find a guy with a box, but they're all right. So what do you want for that? And it was sort of 40 quid. So, okay, fine. Because back then, even if anybody wanted one, you knew that they were easily worth £40. Type 3 dynamos, carburetors, anything like that. Little trinkets still in a VW packet. Nobody knew what it was. It's got a 311 number or 361 for square back or 34 for Type 34, obviously.
Right.
And you could pick up some bargains. Paul Medhurst was doing exactly the same thing in Type 3, in the Type 3 community. And me and Brian were doing it the same thing. And then we'd sort of get pairs of things together and then not so much try and sell them for ridiculous amounts of money, but because we wanted them for our cars, or sell them to friends at good rates, because we after doing it for a few years, you sort of end up being all notchback makes together, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because there weren't many back then on the road, so every time you get a phone call from somebody going, "Oh, are you going to this show? Are you bringing your knots? Yeah, well, we could go there, meet here and drive there together." That kind of thing.
Sure.
So we built up a little community. We're all still pretty much friends to this day.
Well, and then how do you, because eventually you get into manufacturing rubber and things like this, but how do you get, when we talked about like a big NOS haul, have you ever ran into because during the early 90s, late 80s, you started getting that series with Volkswagen or in Hot VWs where they started doing the treasure hunt series. Did you ever do any of that kind of stuff up in the UK?
Not in the UK, no, because one opportunity arose that I can recall, which was a dealership in Burton-on-Trent. A guy who used to work there when the dealership closed, had siphoned off a load of spare parts, and it was obviously very easy for him to sell the bus and Beetle parts fairly quickly at a premium price. And he'd held on to them for quite a while, and then he was sort of left with just Type 3, Type 4, maybe some K70 bits or something.
Yeah.
And I remember going over to Burton with Brian, and Brian bought a crate motor short block in a case, a VW reconditioned block, which went into one of his cars. We got a haul of parts and stuff, but I didn't really get much of a haul of parts until I started venturing into Europe.
And where do you find your first big load of parts?
Well, Philippe in Belgium was a bit off the radar, really, because he would take very early sort of split oval parts and barn door parts to shows. And he said, like, well, come to my place in Belgium and then like have a route around and going, well, how much is this and how much is this? And I wouldn't have said it was particularly cheap, but there was parts that he wasn't selling at shows that he kind of had come with his big hauls, and he just put all the Type 3 stuff to one side. And that was sort of mid-90s. But, you know, how many pairs of armrests or dash pads can you buy?
Well, back then, right?
Yeah. Back then you think, well, I think I only need one pair.
Right.
You know. And then the black ones, no, but I don't mean the black padded ones, not the Z armrest, but the Z armrest, but you had the grey padding, which is the early 62, 63, and then it went to black on the armrests. And then the black ones, they seemed to be everywhere. They were like, but you seem to find more in Europe because they drive on the left, so they're left-hand drive.
Yeah.
You find more right ones because the left ones have been worn out. So we'd find left ones in the UK, and then we'd find right ones in Europe to get a pair. Sometimes boxed, sometimes not. But the largest NOS parts hauls I ever had was when I went to Asia, which I guess we'll get to in a minute.
Sure.
Mm.
And now how do you end up the whole thing? So you're doing the VW thing, and at some point, as you're buying and trading, and you're kind of becoming known as the Type 3 guy in UK. Like if you got Type 3 crap, go see Simon. He'll buy that stuff from you.
It wasn't quite like that. So it wasn't quite like that because Brian ran. It was very old school. It was on paper and phone numbers. Brian ran a club. He called it the Notchback Register because it was a thing back then to have a register. And the Notchback Register's still going, but it's run by somebody else now. But back then, he had a list of, 300 cars. And even if it was one he'd seen in the scrapyard, it was like train spotting. He'd just write the chassis number down and whatever.
Right.
And so he kind of did that. He used to ring me up going, have you got any so-and-so guy in Bristol wants a so-and-so. Have you got one? I've sold out. I'll look for one. And so Brian did that. I didn't, apart from when I went to shows, nobody sort of ring me up unless they were friends and go, oh, you haven't got this switch, have you, that only fits Type 3 or the spare wheel well. They always rot it out. So you haven't got a spare wheel well for sale, have you? That never happened because I was pretty busy in my life, and I just sort of saved the parts up and then went to Dubfries and VW Action mostly, just those two shows. Just took what I had.
Now, how do you jump to manufacturing?
Well, that started because, as I said, I worked for the welding company. And then I worked for them 2 or 3 years, and then I needed a change of scenery. I ended up going back into the electronics industry. I worked for a German company. A European head office was in Germany, but it was a Japanese company. By this time, I'm in a new relationship and looking to get married. And everything's going really well. My fiancée at the time said, oh, do you know about the time we get married? She said, I'd love to go to Japan. And I went, yeah, I would have known. So right. Of course, why not?
Right.
I always fancied that idea. So she got a job working in a school in near Tokyo. And I'd got a secondment to Japan, like an exchange,
right.
Provisionally arranged. And it was all go. And the marriage, the wedding set and everything. And then the guy who was the managed CEO of the UK office did something rather stupid and ended up losing his job. And it was basically, you can't go to Japan now, kiddo. We ended up in Thailand.
Just kind of as a fluke.
It was the last resort. We were going. There was lots of opportunities to teach English as a foreign language in Thailand.
Sure.
You basically had to be English, and the prerequisite was that you had to have a degree, which I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to Thailand. So we turned up in Thailand, and I hadn't got a job.
How do you end up getting into manufacturing? And at this time, you're still selling Volkswagen parts, or you're kind of taking a back seat to it, or?
Well, that all stops because as soon as we move away, I can't sell anything unless I've actually got it in my hand. We actually got the bus everywhere instead of taxi and gone to a pub quiz night at I think it was the Dubliner. And while we were on the bus, about one stop before the Dubliner, I went by a filling station, a petrol station, and there was like 2 Beetles lowered, a split bus, all filling up with fuel. So I jumped off the bus and said to her, I've got to go and see what that's all about. And I went down there, and not many seemed to speak English, but I was like, well, where are you all going? And one of them said, are we going to so-and-so place? And it's the VW club. Thinking, oh, what, do you meet like once a month? And they went, no, every Saturday outside Parliament building where they normally park. We all meet up there. It's like a vintage night, a retro night, but it's mostly Volkswagens and scooters. Right, we write the address down. So they wrote the address down. So I'm saying, look, I've got to go. I've got next week, And I went, and I started going like every other week for about a month. Yeah, there was a really good collection of cars and enthusiasts. There was a few Type 3s. People put like a little tarp on the floor selling parts. And it's a nice little scene. There's quite a big turnout. I get chatting to this guy who's Thai, but he's got a bit of an American accent. What are you doing? He goes, oh, I work for American Airlines. He said, I've come back to Thailand. Kept seeing him every now and again. At the same time, in the daytime, I just got on a random bus and ride somewhere. And then I'd see a Volkswagen sign and hop off. Walk back, knock on the door, and it's closed. I was like, oh, it's closed. And I was like, oh, just keep going back. Eventually found some old VW dealership shops with loads of parts in them.
And they're closed down?
Yeah, they're kind of not open in the day. Nobody wants anything, do they, really? The ones that were open, you'd go in and sort of go, oh, how much is this? How much is that? How much is this? And after you've asked 3 or 4 things, and all you want to do is know the price of it, they kind of get bored with you. And, well, when you want to buy something, they'll talk to you. So I learned quite quickly that you just go in and spend a few quid, buy something you don't really need, but
right.
You can pass it on. And then they've got interest. Then you turn up, you buy something. And quite quickly, they're like, well, and I'm like, what's in here? And they go, well, have a look. And you'd open a door, a little wooden cabinet, and you'd open the door and go, oh, NOS parts. Lovely. I think one of the first product big hauls I've had was early bay bumper joining strips, the cloud white. The little vinyl strip that you have because it's a 3-piece bumper and you have a plastic strip. And there was a box with like 200 in, and they were very clean and NOS and still supple. And I was like, well, how much are these? And they were like, oh, $1 each. So I was like, all right, then I'll have 10 of them. And I went home and I went on the Samba, and I seen a guy who'd obviously previously been to Thailand selling them for $30 a pair. And I thought, there's a business opportunity here, right?
Sure.
So I started advertising on Samba, and then I was about doing it for 2 or 3 months, and I started found this shop, and there was one shop who was closed, but the doors were a little bit ajar, and you could see in, and he had loads of stuff. Anyway, go back to this guy that I met who'd come back to Thailand. His name's Ton, and we're having a natter one day, and I said, where do you live then? And he lived about 10 minutes away from where I was living in Thailand. He goes, yeah, I've moved back, and I'm going around buying up all parts. And I said, oh, have you been to that shop on Rama 4? He won't let anybody in. He goes, no, because I've bought the whole shop out.
Oh, wow.
Right. So then we become great buddies, and then I'm going to his every day, and then we're off go into these other shops that he didn't know about. Oh, one of the really funky things I ever found was chrome, the little pressed aluminium. You know, on a cabriolet, it has the 2 vents on the back, the air intakes on the boot lid.
Yes.
I've found them in original packaging, 2 sets. Yeah, early. Yeah, so they'd be, I don't know what the year would have changed. It was up to 66, I think.
Yeah.
The length or something like that. It was up to 66, and then it changed, and then that ran through until, and then they also put it on the larger size, or the different size, or the extra strip, or the extra hole, also went on to the first year of the 1302 for extra cooling before they went to the four vents in a boot lid. And I found 2 sets, and the guy, I said, well, how much do you want for them? And he said something like £20 a set. And I hadn't got £20 because I needed to get a taxi back. And I said, well, can I take a photo? And I put like a T-shirt down, a spare T-shirt down, took a photo of them.
Yeah.
And I put them, I went home and I sold them on the Sandbar for like $150 for one set. And then the money came through, I think with PayPal, was straight away. And then I got my debit card. I transferred the money as soon as I can. I got my debit card, drew out the $150 worth of Thai baht, got a taxi, went and bought the 2 pairs. And then the next night I sold the second set for $150. And another thing I found was, it was almost within the same week, and it was a shop that was 2 doors down from that one, was a guy who'd never in, because he worked in the daytime and he hadn't opened his shop for years. And I went there and it was open. I drove through Chinatown late one night and it was open. And he was quite chatty and everything. He said, yes, help yourself.
Really?
And I opened better stuff was kind of in the back room, not really on display. But in his display cabinets, he'd got a chrome ashtray for deluxe split bus. And I said, oh, have you got any of these? And he went, yeah, somewhere, I've got a few. And he disappeared for 5 minutes and came back with a box of 20. And most of them were still in the boxes.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I can't remember what I paid for them.
So you start seeing this like Thailand is like the lost place of Volkswagen dealerships.
Yeah. That's what happened. And so this guy Tom, he was doing the same as me, because he'd come back to Thailand without a job because his father had taken ill. And so the first product I ever actually did was the bumper joining strips that I bought for early bay bumper joining strips, because when you got 170 pairs,
right,
and I sold quite quickly, and then you get noticed. So I had, and I obviously knew other people in the industry like Status VW, Custom and Commercial.
Right.
I'd sort of started chatting to them like, I found a load of stuff. Are you interested? And then Justin was like, well, how many of them have you got? I'll take the lot. Another really easy product to sell, which no one has ever had for years, was the first year early bay wiper arms. There's 1 year only on the wiper arms. A stash of about 60 of those. And not only that, but the washer jet, a nozzle in grey, like a silvery grey.
Yeah.
And several hundred of those. And I sold them wholesale quite quickly and individually. And it sort of generated a bit of money. The reason why the joining strips was my first ever product was because I ran out and I'd sold them really quickly. And we were interested in, so Tom, I'm a type 3 guy in my heart.
Yeah.
But everybody knows that if you make stuff for Beetles and Split Bus, Bay, you've got a bit of a market there to sell it to. and he's a boss guy. And we went knocking doors on factories and asking around who can make this. And we went to several times the local exhibition, automotive exhibition, where they advertise cars, but also people that make parts.
Sure.
Locally. Really big venue. And he came back. I went with him on Saturday, and he came back on the Sunday. And he said, I found a rubber guy. And this guy had just got a few tables, but there's a few profiles of rubber that he made. And it turned out that the business wasn't doing very well for him. And he'd had a business partner, and his business partner had run off with all the money.
Typical story.
Yeah. So the only way to save his business was to get some more business. We gave him a load of samples. He made the tools for free because he needed the business that badly. He didn't charge a couple of $100 to make the tool. And in all fairness, he did a very good job because he didn't even know how to make the tools. He had to learn for an extrusion machine. And because if you want a square profile, a round profile is easy. Mm-hmm. It's a round hop. But if you want a square profile, it isn't square because as the hydraulic pressure pushes it out, it escapes quicker in the corners, I think. So you end up with a funny shape.
Yeah, it stretches the backside of it.
Yeah, something like that. Either that or it escapes quicker in one area than another. So you have to actually make the square shape a different shape to start with to compensate for that. Apart from the vinyl bumper joining strips, split boss windows seals were the first thing we made.
Now, when you're making them off of NOS pieces, giving them an NOS piece and saying, I need this piece and this.
Yes and no. Right. What originally happened was we ordered a load of rubber from the States. Went, oh, that looks pretty straightforward. Made a load of stuff. It fitted all right. And this particular company had the ability to put a memory corner in it, which nobody else did. Because to put a memory corner in, molded. You'd call it molded corner, but it's not. It's memory.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody else cuts it and glues it together, type thing.
Yeah. So the process of making a square shaped seal that everybody else sells as a circle to fit for a fixed side window on a split boss, let's say, you shoot it to the length you want, to within a couple of millimeters of the length you want. And then you lay it out on a former, like a wooden shape, in the shape that you want it to end up in. So it gets extruded. It's still a little bit toffee. It's not, you can't break it or put a fingerprint in it because it goes through a latex setting solution. So the outside's pretty solid. And then you lay it around the shape you want it to end up in. And then you stick it in the autoclave, a big boiler basically, for 45 minutes. And when you bring it out, it can only ever be the shape you formed it in. And that's what gives you the corners.
And so you're creating this relationship with this guy in Thailand, who's about to go out of business. And now you guys like, hey, make me this, and you just start posting everything right away on the Samba. Now, with respect to quality of rubber, like how are you emulating similar? Because it seems that the factory VW rubber is like lasts 60 years in some circumstances. You know what I mean? And
it seems that way, doesn't it?
Right.
It seems that way.
And so does this guy, because that's what he does, he knows rubber compositions, he can look at something and say, this is that, or, I mean...
Okay, so you may have heard the term EPDM, and I can't remember exactly what it stands for. Synthetic.
Ethylene, propylene, diene, monomer rubber.
Yeah. In the Google description of it, so this is the typical rubber you use for window rubber. For quite a long time, most EPDM rubber does not use organic latex product. It is all petrochemical, all synthetic. That makes it a better quality than what Volkswagen would have used back in the 50s and 60s, unless they actually used a petrochemical substance, because natural latex comes from a tree, gets sold from the sap, the people that do the sap, the natural latex gets sold onto, and it gets refined. And it's really down to the quality of the refinement, because there's also additional organic, there could be a bit of a leaf in it, or stick or a twig, so it has to be refined. And so it's a bit of the consistency. When you buy a barrel of natural latex, you're going to mix it with a load of other compounds to turn it into the rubber that you want it to be. If you're a cheap company, you can't tell how much natural latex is in that suspension. So you're kind of winging it. Also, depending on the temperature of the day, you don't know the viscosity either. So you don't know the density of the material, you don't know the viscosity. And then, so you're going to kind of wing it. Well, I'm going to have 40% of this, 30% of that, a couple of pinches of salt, a bit of sulfur to fix it, and some catalyzer and a load of black material. And we're going to mix it all together to make a tar. And depending on the ratio of how you mix it, gives you the elasticity, the elastic properties, and
Right.
the
Density.
short hardness,
Sure.
the
Memory.
density, yeah. And then depending on the viscosity, and then you shoot it through an extrusion machine where the vanes are turning at a fixed speed that give you a fixed hydraulic pressure. But if your material isn't the same as yesterday, it's going to come out different, slightly.
So quality control, as far as like repetition on the factory's part, is crucial.
Yeah, we've been buying some product locally which hadn't got molded corners, and it was pretty cheap stuff. And it fitted okay, and it looked okay, but it didn't feel right. And we cut it open, and the cheap companies, not that they made stuff for Split Boss anyway, but you could buy a front windscreen seal for a 68 Beetle.
Right.
You can buy one in any country in the world, I think. It was pretty cheap and pretty gnarly, and we cut one open to have a look at the profile, and we found they'd been recycling rubber into it. So, all the offcuts you end up with, this bit of waste, they grind it down into powder. And if they were really cheap, they didn't grind it fine enough. And then they chuck it back into the mix, because who's going to know?
Sure.
So sometimes you'd find what felt like tiny bit of pebble or like grains of sand, but it was actually grains of rubber in the window. And that's what they would do in a cheap. That's how you keep costs down, is use a cheap supply. And so this guy was making rubber seals for Isuzu. He was making it for their production line. It wasn't for aftermarket. It was for their production line. So it had to be pretty good.
Sure.
So we bought a load of stuff in maybe West Coast metric, let's say, and we copied a couple of their shapes, and it worked all right. And then by that time, I'd started going to European shows with my dad, selling parts that I'd picked up, NOS parts and stuff. I went with a swag bag of all these new rubbers that I'd made over to Holland, and there'd be a lot of German people there. Axel Storber, I went seeing Axel. I've known him a few years already, and I said, "Oh look, I make this stuff." And he was, "Oh, it's pretty good. Looks pretty good. Yeah, well, do you want to leave us some samples?" I said, "Yeah, okay." I got his card, and I rang him up a couple of weeks later, and he said, "Yeah, I really like it." He said, "But your profile's all wrong." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" And he went, "Yeah." He said, "Buy this, buy this, buy this. Go make that, and I'll buy it from you." Then I started hunting down NOS off-used car samples, so that it kind of reinventing it, really, actually start trying to make it slightly better if we could.
Well, yeah, I wonder, when people remanufacture stuff, what they're starting with, and if what they're starting with is slightly off, by the time you make a mold of it and it gets quote unquote close enough, it could be way off by the time you go into production, right? So,
most definitely. So, EPDM was a very good start. Mm-hmm. Synthetic EPDM, which was guaranteed supply, the lifespan on the rubbers, amazing. I had stuff in the garden for like 15 years, and you could have wiped the snail and snot off it and put it on a car, we had some of the first rubbers we ever put on one of Ton's double cabs, which got repainted a few times.
Now, Ton, the guy that you're partners with, his name's Ton, like Ton.
Yeah.
And now he's gonna focus on making bus stuff, and you're focusing on making Type 3 stuff. But you guys are kind of helping this guy out directly. Now, when you start producing decent amounts of material or product, do other people start trying to get in the business? Do they start? I mean, is over there is in Taiwan? Is there a lot of people see, hey, these guys are making a lot of this over at this plant, let's make it and sell it also? Is there a lot of that going on over there? Or
you have to kind of, we did really well with this rubber guy out of town. He was out of town as well, which was good. Still deal with the same factory today. It's like we're family now because you've known them so long. It's like family, and can you help us out with this and sort of thing. There has to be an element of trust.
Sure.
Because I can tell you through the years, we've had stuff made. I've had casting. I say we've had casting work done, and then I've turned up at a show and seen my stuff casted being sold by other people, and I know it's mine.
Sure.
And I've stumped up like a couple of $1,000s to get the project going. Right. out of money that I've made from selling stuff, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, just reinvesting it to develop more product line.
Yeah. I mean, it might be that product is seconds.
Sure.
But still, right. It was my idea, and I've paid for them to make, because anything you do that's casting usually has a core in it as well. And so you have to make a core stamper to make the void. Right. Which is a wooden former, which you might only pay $200-300 for it to be made, but you've paid for that. I can't really remember how many people have had, we can make that, do that, and then next thing you know, everybody's got it and you've paid for it. So you learn quite quickly that you don't give everything all to one factory.
It's like building bombs. You have to send every piece out to a different person.
Yeah. Well, that. Funny enough, that's exactly what happened when I worked at Marconi.
Yeah.
They had about 15 different factories all over the UK, and I worked on the word you just said, that may or may not have had a guidance system. Right. Yeah. And each part of that came from a different factory and then was obviously then assembled by the Ministry of Defence separately. So nobody had one themselves. They only had part of one.
Right. And so in that same technique to try to preserve your products, we talked about my Type 34 for a little bit, but I actually purchased, and at the time there was a guy in Thailand and it was under the name Pop that was selling rubber and parts and pieces and stuff like that. Yeah. And the car, during the process of building, I'd ordered all the parts in advance, some to my guy, and then he called me and said, hey, these windshield pieces are way too short, and I couldn't track down this guy, Pop. And this was early Samba days. And then funnies, they came in this kind of wax paper, this purple crayon on it, so I had to order new ones for like an outrageous amount of money through Status VW. And the ones that I received had the same exact, they were in the same plastic and the same everything. It was interesting because it was like out of nowhere, Type 34 parts became available and then they disappeared.
Yeah. Well, I can't know what happened there, but if you bought the window seals, the door top seal, the pop out seals from Pop, they came from us.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, out here, also in the desert, things react. Like out here, the bodies are perfect when it comes to rust, but all the rubber, those parts are just garbage.
Have you ever looked at? I think you'd see it more on maybe a Beetle on the vent wing, on the rear quarter window seal. You see on the side there, it looks like crazy paving, or you know how they shrink and then crack.
Yes.
Have you ever noticed how uniform it seems to be?
Right.
That the cracks are like 2 millimeters apart and then bend to the left and then back again, almost like a little bit like your Greek motif.
Right.
Have you ever noticed that? Ever seen that?
I mean, I've seen it, but I've never paid attention to like looking at it. Obviously, now it's something I may look at. But
So when you look at it and you see this sort of uniform shape running through it, that's because the rubber wasn't folded enough. So when they make rubber compound, it's like that, but on a much industrial scale, where they keep adding the materials, rolling it, folding it, rolling it, folding it.
Oh, like taffy,
like pastry, yeah, like taffy, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't fold it enough, when it comes to its final perishing, giving up the game, you can see that the crack lines are very evenly distributed, and the wider the crack lines, the less it was folded. Because have you ever bought a rubber seal and you took it out of the packet and it's covered in white powder?
Yes, is that the release from the mold?
That's no, it's an outgassing. So they use sulfur compounds as a catalyzer to fix the rubber. And if they use a little bit too much, because they want it to set properly, over a period of time, and I'm talking like 1 or 2 years in a warehouse, it outgasses the sulfur. The sulfur reacts with the atmosphere, and that's what the white powder is.
Now, in the window rubber process, when you're making it, do you have to add the coloring to it to make it black?
Yeah, because do you remember seeing, way back when they first invented rubber tires for cars, they were pale grey.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very, like a very pale grey, almost off-white colour. So that's the very early invention of rubber. They never used black. It was never black. That came along a bit later. But people like that white tyre, the white tyres.
Right.
So that's when they did black tyres later, then they started doing white walls.
Yeah.
The black colour that they add actually gives it a longer life.
Really?
As well. It's good. It gives it better ultraviolet properties, as well as giving it better elasticity and a better longer life, because those natural tires didn't last very long at all.
In this process of doing this and manufacturing rubber parts and pieces, what was maybe one of the biggest losers you made that you thought, man, if I remake this, it's going to sell like crazy, and you made it and it was useless? And then what's your biggest surprise piece?
The biggest loser? Roof racks. It wasn't my idea. Ton had got an original Westphalia roof rack, the wooden slat one for a bus, with the aluminium stands that come to a bend, and then you've got like an aluminium surround at the top with the 3-bow and 2-bow. Beautiful looking things. And if you saw a ratty looking one, you'd buy it because they're just gorgeous. The amount of engineering that's gone into them is amazing. And he spent a lot of development time having the bows pressed, because they're steel and they have to be particularly shaped and at the ends, and they have to be exactly, because you can't sort of unbend them if they're the wrong size. And a lot of trips to a fabrication guy to get it done. And of course, nice wood is very available in Thailand. And then you had to pay for the casting for the aluminium pieces. And then they've got to be right. So he made about, initially he made enough stuff to do like 20, and they sold like hotcakes. MP brought theirs out, and it was half the price.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we wouldn't know that they were going to make it. So we presumed that it was made in Taiwan, and it wasn't as nice as his. But he'd also done a deluxe version where the bows were stainless steel. And that cost a lot of money to make them press those bows out in stainless.
It's hard to figure out what's going to take off with the consumers, right? Because you get so many people that they love the original, and then you think like, well, I can improve the original by doing this, and people they like the original.
But the magic of making the Westphalia roof rack, 2-bow, 3-bow, 4-bow, whatever size you want, the magic, right?
Yeah.
Is it can be flat packed and customer assembled. So if you've got a half roof length split boss roof rack made out of tubular steel and welded, it's impossible to ship around the world.
I can imagine.
Without a great cost. So the idea was you make it flat pack. I think maybe he sold 20. MP brought one out and it was kind of half the price, and it was flat pack, bought it in a box, delivered, assemble yourself. And that was the big. I would imagine that was the biggest loser.
So you're saying the Type 34 rubber was the biggest surprise because you didn't think there were that many out there being manufactured, or I mean, being rebuilt?
No, it was because I had suggested to make. We really concentrated on Beetle and Split Boss and Bay at the very beginning because that was where your volume market would be.
Sure.
Type 3 kind of developed. Type 3 stuff developed at the same time, but the first push was to do window seals and anything that could be extruded. And then I don't know, there was a lot of Type 34s lying around in Thailand. They seem to have per capita of people one of the largest number of Type 34s in the world.
Really?
Yeah, they were sold. I think they were sold to the army at a discount price. Military vehicles or customs vehicles aren't subject to VAT and tax duty because they are a military vehicle or a diplomatic vehicle, let's say.
Uh-huh.
So although it was an expensive car, it would still be cheaper. They're not going to want to drive around. You know, a military general isn't going to want to drive around in a 1200 Beetle now, is he?
Right.
Right. They seem to, well, because Thailand's also right-hand drive, and I don't think they had the sales in the UK and Japan that they were expecting. So I think they'd over-manufactured, and I think they offered them a price, and a lot of cars ended up in Thailand because they were very affordable, and military, well, they've got a budget and they don't have to pay. So airport vehicles. So if split bus, one of the other most common cars that you find in Thailand, or did find in Thailand, was double sliding door option.
Oh, really?
Split bus. You know that center seat where both ends fold?
Yeah, the super rare double fold down middle seat.
Yeah. There was a load of them in Thailand.
Yeah, so much for super rare, right? Because the airport buses.
When I said there was a load, because they are on airport land.
Sure.
They fly them in or whatever, and they never enter the country.
Oh, God.
They don't get registered. They have an airport number on them. And this is back in the days when people walked to the airplanes. This would be to drive the flight crew
on the tarmac to the plane.
Yes, yeah. That they got a deluxe drive. They did. So there was a lot of those. I've seen. I can count a dozen that I've actually seen in person, and I've known of others for sale. And they're ex airport vehicles with options and all sorts on them. Going back to the Type 34, there seem to be a lot of Type 34s, but obviously they rot out just as well in Thailand as anywhere else.
Sure.
And a few people started saying about, a few wealthy people did sort of perhaps bought a car that was a going concern, but it needed a bit of work, and obviously all the rubber shot. And I'd sort of uttered, we should make some stuff. No, it's a waste of money. Who's going to buy it, you know? And then I sort of came to the office one day and I was told, we're going to make it. I was like, okay then. Because it had been a no from the sort of beginning for a while. And so we made it literally in a very small batch just for local people. And, I approached people in that industry to see if they were interested. And strangely enough, at the same time, because you mentioned pop, another person in Thailand started developing, I think, vent wing seals and some bushings and some random parts for Type 34s, which we hadn't done. I offered my stuff and they offered their stuff. The offer was given to them if they could buy my stuff, that they would supply all of the stuff together to the USA.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So The powers that be didn't want to buy it from two different places.
Right.
Like, you can get the window seals from him and this and them.
Too much
I don't know.
hassle.
Yeah, allegedly. But I'm still here.
Yeah.
And they supplied for about a year or two, and then let quite a lot of people down.
Yeah, that's kind of the tough thing in the VW world, right? You get a lot of these guys that start that are just enthusiasts that find an opportunity. They love the hobby. They feel like they can contribute something, and so they go into manufacturing, and then it turns into a real job. They usually get out of it.
It wasn't quite like that. It was more like, in general, yeah. There's a very unique story to what happened with those people. It's something to do with large amounts of alcohol and no, seriously, and unreliability. A couple of people that decided to do it. Pop was really just a salesperson or the person that talked to people and said, "Do you want some of this?" And the people that were backing him and making it had nothing to do with the end user. So there was too many people in the chain, whereas there was a factory that made it, and then there was me. Oh, and Tom, obviously, but there was us. So if there was a problem, we could talk to the factories. There was a problem. When you bought it from me, I hadn't bought it from some other guy who bought it from some other guy who had another guy make it.
Yeah.
And that was their problem, because they had obviously a weakest link in one of their chains.
Yeah. And
that's what happened to them.
And how big are the swings industry with respect to petroleum prices?
Oh, yes, that does. I think what happens is they try and stabilize it. One of the big changes in terms of incurred costs, was the COVID era, because shipping, I can't know what shipping was in terms of barrel of petrochemical products, but shipping in terms of meterage, if you were to ship, let's say, from Thailand to England, consolidated meterage shipping would be about $120 per cubic meter. And during the first year of COVID, it went up to 600.
Wow.
So the same would apply to any raw material costs. And it wasn't the upload in the price of oil per barrel. It was to do with supply and demand, because the airlines weren't shipping anything. Because the airlines weren't flying, generally, there was no associated cargo shipping with them. So you get obviously commercial flights that route, and they've got postage on there, and there was no planes flying. So everything needed to go by boat, and then containers became a premium. And that's what happened. A $1,500 container from one place to another place went to $4,500.
COVID definitely had it. What it had to do worldwide with everything was, first, it changed the dynamics of the expectation on the customer. It then became the supplier who was in charge. And I think to some degree that's still maintained, where, at least in my industry, it changed to where instead of the consumer setting the demands, it was, well, on the consumer's part, when can you get to it? When can you put me on schedule? And it was just that shift in who's in charge, right? The supplier or the end user, and it became the supplier then became in charge.
Yeah. Is it SIP one or CLIP one? I can't remember how you say it.
Yeah, CIP one, SIP one.
SIP one. So you got SIP one and you got JBugs.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, from my understanding, I may be wrong, they're the most competitive price people.
Yes.
In the VW industry.
Correct.
And so you could go on any given day on a Facebook page, Type 3 Army, Notchback Society, whatever, a Type 3 page,
mm-hmm.
or even a Type 34 page, and say, "Oh, my master cylinder's playing up. Anybody know where I might be able to get one? I've got a 67, 68 disc brake dual master cylinder Type 34." And the amount of people that recommend JBugs and SIP1, and it's kind of laughable, because they won't have anything.
Right.
Or if they do, they've got to buy it from ISB West, right? So then obviously the people who are in the know will say, "Oh, where do you live?" And if you live in Ohio, they'll say ISP West, or they'll say Mario
Right.
as a best guess. And if they're in Europe, some people will say me, some people will say Mario, and then there's some people that haven't read that it's in Belgium, and they still recommend Sip One and Airheads and J-Bugs.
Well, I think that's a testament to their marketing, right? They're nonstop marketers, and you know,
I think it's them putting it on.
You could.
If somebody's asking for something, I think it's just them putting it on. I'm not saying they do. I don't care, because for sure, if you rang up and wanted it, they wouldn't have it.
Right.
The reason I mentioned this was because you brought up quality. Surely people would pay more for quality, and unfortunately, the only way that builds up takes a long time. I've been doing this for 23 years.
Yeah.
It's taken till literally the last few years for people to say to me, "Is your quality as good as this, or is it as good as that?
Yeah.
Is it like Mario's? Is it like ISP West? Is it like this?" And I'll go, "Well, yes. If you want molded corner, you want this, you want this." And so the retail pricing for Type 3 parts in the UK is I'm cheaper than Heritage, and the other biggest one would be Just Campers. There is Cool Air, but they just basically buy from Heritage. So I would be the cheapest. If they're selling it at £49, I'm selling it at £46. And it's most likely a better product. I wouldn't say whose is rubbish. I'm not doing that.
Right.
But I have people will go on to Facebook and say, "Oh, I've bought something from so-and-so and it doesn't fit." And then I'll have customers of mine who bought 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago say, "If you need a windscreen rubber, Simon's your man." And then they'll message me and I'll go, "Yeah, what do you need?" And then I'll go, "Do you need anything else?" And then hopefully they'll ring me up, we'll have a chat, and I'll say, yeah. And they'll go, "Oh, I've been looking for this for ages." "Oh yeah, I do those." "Well, look, if you just want to see what I do, go and have a look on my eBay site, and anything you see there, it's obviously 10 or 12% cheaper anyway."
Right.
And if you're going to, I can do you free post, if it's not too heavy, because post in the UK is not too bad. We've got fairly good courier and stuff like that. And so that word of mouth or that recommendation takes a very, very, very long time to happen.
It takes time or marketing too.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time back in when I in the earlier years. We'd come back to England for 2 months in the summer, and I'd go to shows, and I'd go back, trawl through my garage and say, "Oh yeah, all right, that's it, fastback rear window seal, I've got one of those now," and we do that, and I just cut bits off it, send it down, and fly back with samples, and I'd go over to Europe and meet people, and then I'd perhaps get invited. I say, "Well, can I come in at your place?" And I'd perhaps find an NOS something, and then I'd take it out to Thailand and we'd retool it because it was correct rather than a best guess. There's a few products that we've made better than original. I can't specifically say anything, but yeah. So prior to doing your car, not long before your car, he did Paul Warman's car. I'm sure you've seen the car.
I have, yeah.
And they had great trouble. Not they hadn't have great trouble, but the car came and there was loads of bits and stuff. And obviously somewhere along the lines, one of the door windows had got changed, on the pile, and got sent away with another load of parts or something like that. And they weren't the same. The left and the right weren't the same. One had a little chamfer in one corner. So there's little nuances throughout the years, and especially when you're dealing with a coach-built car, there's too many subtle changes. And the vent wing, I can't make a vent wing seal that's going to suit everybody.
I mean,
Um,
you've got to try to make a piece as
mm,
somewhat universal as it can be used
yeah,
for multiple applications. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense to make the part.
yeah, and it was really right. So I had good samples of the rubber from 2 to 3 different cars, and we we sent the rubber away to be 3D scanned, and then we had a 3D printed one made from like an average scan, and then we got it to fit. Okay, and so we took it to the tooling guy and said, "I'll make this and make a left-hand side and a right side." And the tooling guy was, "Well, I can't just make an opposite. I want." So if we supplied him with the left one, he wanted a right one as well. So then we had to go away and reinvent the get the drawing changed and have it 3D printed. It's ridiculous, and have it 3D printed in an opposite.
Yeah.
And we thought, well, that'll be all right then. But then it didn't fit any of the frames, you know.
I mean, it's
And we're like,
definitely you wonder how Volkswagen did that with so many different parts and pieces.
it wasn't Volkswagen, was it? It wasn't a
Carmen.
mass-produced product.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's one of those products I really, really struggled, even though there was a commitment to buy, and we knew that we could also sell a lot. We nearly actually gave up a few times, rather than, you sort of throw a bit of money at it, and you're like, oh, I don't think I want to throw any more money at this. You just cut a loss and do it, and say sorry. Let somebody else go through the pain. You asked me once earlier on, one of the bigger successes actually, and I never actually answered. And it was one of a surprising success was a deluxe grab handle for Bay. So
really?
it's black with chrome ends,
Yeah.
with the chrome plated plastic ends, because nobody made one. Also, the grab handle that you could buy, which was South American, was wholesale out at like $1.50, $2.
Right.
So you couldn't compete with that. The vinyl was awful. They broke. Their fit was bad, and they looked horrible. But that was what was available, and there was probably several different manufacturers. Because you can chrome plastic, and that's how the originals were, we decided, well, mate, we'll give it a go. And we couldn't make enough.
No.
It was a surprise, because no one had ever had it before. We took a chance that it would be a good seller. And a couple of guys in Germany still had stock, and they were selling them for €35 for NOS one each. We were pitching at a retail price of around £30 a pair, which was the equivalent of the euro price for one. And obviously we put together a nice wholesale price, and we couldn't make enough of them. All of a sudden, people stopped buying them.
They just stopped, you said?
Yeah, all of a sudden. I mean, so I lived in Thailand for 5 or 6 years, and then I'd sort of spent 6 months there, 6 months here, and then it got down to 3 months there, 9 months here. So before I'd never really retailed my own product. Plus I wholesaled it to quite a few people in the UK. So I didn't really want to queer my own pitch, as it were. Sort of stuck with the Type 3 stuff on retail. And I was retailing that particular product. And I was selling 2 to 3 pairs a week retail myself. And I'd get an wholesale order for 200, and a wholesale order for 100, and then another one for 50. We couldn't not. We had to try and find a new rivet manufacturer, because we ran out of rivets from the guy at Home Depot, which had the perfect rivet. They ran out of the 3,000 rivets we bought from them, and they couldn't get any more, so we had to find somebody to make the rivet. And this went on for a couple of years. It was great. No, there's 4 people that make that product. Yeah.
I think it's great what you're doing. I appreciate the time and energy you put into trying to do the right thing for the hobby, and the fact that being able to make a bit of a living off of this is pretty good. And again, because of your passion for the hobby itself, has turned in, a good thing for the consumer because you care about the quality of your stuff. So anything new you guys have coming up?
I'd like to say yes, but not really.
Mm-hmm. So overall, now you've been in the business for over 20, 25 years doing this.
Mm.
Did you ever think 30 years ago that you would be doing this?
No, no, I had a slightly different plan for life, to be honest.
Right.
Uh,
And now looking back over these last so many years, being now, instead of just a mere enthusiast with a hobby to sell some extra parts and pieces, what's maybe the biggest takeaway you take from doing this and capitalizing on opportunity when you went to Thailand, not looking to do this, but what's the biggest thing you take away from all?
I loved just wandering around and finding parts. I mean, I went to Australia, Malaysia, Singapore for parts, and Sri Lanka, and it sort of helped me to travel really, and combine traveling with maybe a business opportunity, and I think that's what I take away from that.
You've done a lot in the hobby, and I'm glad we got to chat and get some of your story of all the adventures that you've been through. By all means, if anything new, you decide you're coming out with anything new, I want to be the first one to help you bring that information to the people out there. Now, if people are trying to get a hold of you in the UK or any of that stuff, how can they get a hold of you? Where do they track
I have a Facebook page which is Notch 1500. If they Facebook search my name, but it's spelled Kelley, then they'll see my private page with the picture of a notch on. And I've got an eBay account which is Notch 1500 again. So I try to keep the same theme running.
Yeah, it's on your on your eBay account. You've got almost 500 parts listed, 408 parts listed for sale.
Yeah, it's quite an eclectic mix. I mean, I could talk all night really, and I know we can't really. You're going to have to condense it down or make it a part two. There's some of those products are mine. Most of the products are mine. Some I buy quite a lot in from ISP West. Mm-hmm. They do a very good. They're made in America, I think.
Yeah,
they do a very good sponge rubber, which is and it's a nice fit and shape for a bonnet and boot seal. So I buy quite a lot in from ISP West. Now, I mean, Alex is an amazing passion for Type 3s.
Yeah.
I met him once, nearly 30 years ago, at a European show.
Yeah.
Because he used to hang with Axel Storber when he come over to Europe. And what a passion,
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, anybody wants to get a hold of you, they can reach out to you through your Facebook, through your eBay store, and some things like that. And then, I mean, I'm sure you get requests all the time to make custom special pieces, and I'm sure you'll definitely have your response for things like that. Or people might find out that you make stuff that they didn't know that you made.
Yeah, that does happen a lot.
Yeah. So, well, Simon, I appreciate you taking some time to come on the podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
And
thank you, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll
and your car's pretty, by the way.
Well, hey, I appreciate that, man. It wouldn't be done without your help. That's for sure.
Yeah, I took that video. I took a video of it when I went down to Andy's the second time.
Yeah.
And I came home and I watched it with Sammy, my partner, and I was like, "You gotta look at this." And she was like, "Oh, I want one of those."
Yeah. No, it's I'm pretty happy with it. Spike and those guys did a great job. And thanks
if you're gonna go custom, if you're gonna go custom, you might as well go the whole hog.
That's it.
And you can't do it half by half, can you?
Not at all.
No.
Well, Simon, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate it, and I may see. I'll be in the UK. I'll be in the UK later this year. I'll be at Skeg Vegas.
I'm always I've done that show about 12 years now.
Oh, well, good. Then
I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it again this year.
I'll see you there. I'm going to be at Skeg Vegas and also be at the Air Mighty show this year.
Oh, whereabouts is that one?
That one's in the Netherlands.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So,
Oh, great to see you then.
hey, I look forward to it, my friend.
Take care.
All right. Thanks. Well, guys, there you have it. It's a story of world travel. Life happens, and then you start making some rubber. Simon Kelley's a pretty cool cat. He's got a lot of stories, and I'm definitely glad that he's a guy that got into doing that. And just it's so interesting by happenstance how everything kind of falls together, and next thing you know, you're manufacturing rubber. And funny, if it wasn't for the Samba, maybe that stuff wouldn't be happening. So one of these days I'm going to get Everett Barnes of the Samba on here. I've talked to him once or twice, and he's a little mic shy to get on here, but I think it'd be a great story just to hear the story of the Samba. So anyway, appreciate you guys for supporting the podcast. Make sure you share the podcast. Go subscribe today. Share this podcast with all your friends. It's available anywhere your podcasts are listened to. Also, go subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget George's YouTube channel for a lot of really cool how-to videos. Go check out George's YouTube channel. It's The Wagon on YouTube, The Wagon, W-A-G-E-N, T-H-E-W-A-G-E-N. I put a link in the description down below so you guys can go subscribe to George's channel today. So he's putting a lot of hard work and effort into making those super cool, detailed videos about fixing up your Volkswagen. So you will not be sorry. Go check that out today. Also, I'm excited for One Crazy Weekend 2025, guys. It's going to be a weekend to remember. There's people coming from all over. I did want to mention that I will be out at the Niagara show this year that's coming up in June. If you guys want to get more information on that, go to GermanAir, AIRE.ca. Go check it out. That's the German Air website for their car show in Social Ontario's premier VW show. It's going to be June 21st through 22nd at Niagara Falls. Last year they had over 350 cars. So go check it out today. I'll be out there. So if you guys are listeners, make sure you come out and see me. I always bring something special for our listeners, and I'm excited to go check out the northeast section of the VW hobby. I really enjoy meeting all the different people. I've met people all over the world. I haven't done as much East Coast time as I really like to. So my goal this year is to get out and do more East Coast events. Just go check them out and really kind of hang out over there. So hopefully this one I'll be able to drive my Impy Bug over to. So I've got my Impy Bug being worked on over there and in Pennsylvania. So who knows? We'll see, depending on what's where, who's what, and what's done. Hopefully you'll see me up there in the Impy GTV, the 70 Impy GTV Bug that I've got. So I'll also be at Viva Skeg Vegas in August this year, the 15th through the 17th, 2025. Viva Skeg Vegas, Lincolnshire's largest classic VW show. You got to go check it out if you haven't been there. I mean, get your life right, bro. You got to show up at the events, show up at the shows, participate with the people. Let your hair down, loosen up a little bit. Don't be so wound so tight, all right? If you're that guy, that's who I'm talking to. If you're the guy that everything bothers you, you got an opinion about everything, bro, chill. Just show up at the event, relax, make some friends, have a good time. That's what it's all about. It's all about enjoying the people, the cars, and look, if it ain't your cup of tea, it ain't your cup of tea. You ain't got to sip it. So support those events that are going on this year. I'll also be back at be doing another cruise this year from Scotland to the Air Mighty show. So that we got so much stuff going on this year. I don't know which week. Well, I know which weekend I'm going to be going to in Southern California. I'll be announcing some stuff on that. I'm working on some other stuff with some other people that will be. I know it's a little cryptic and low key right now, but it's going to be worth it. I'll let you guys know. A lot of Europeans coming to the States this year for the DKP event that's going to be happening. So I'll be announcing more stuff on that in the next few episodes coming up. So a lot of cool stuff coming up, and I'm excited to be a part of some stuff like that. Dean Kirsten and I are working on something, and I promise you it's going to be awesome. It's going to be definitely a day to remember. So good stuff's happening there. And guys, I love this hobby. Every time I walk out in my garage, I look at Zorba, bro. I just like a little ding off my teeth when I look at it, like the little glimmer in my smile, twinkle in my eye. And it doesn't stop there because I got a bunch of hoopties around the yard that every time I look at them, I'm like, oh, one day. So hopefully you guys, well, not hopefully. I know you guys are the same as I am. So It is what it is. You got a sickness, and at least this is where you come to get your sickness filled. If you guys got any questions, comments, or anything like that, shoot me an email at bill@letstalkdubs. I always enjoy hearing from listeners to the podcast, and I love nothing more than bringing you guys weekly content so you can have something to listen to make that long, boring day at work go better. So I'm looking forward to it, guys, and until next week, later.
You probably don't know that there's a new Volkswagen out that doesn't look like a Volkswagen. It's got everything that people who like the bug like.